Bentornati, benvenuti. It's time to discuss all things Serie A. Let's go. And we're starting in Naples as Napoli beat a hapless Milan 2-1. It took a matter of seconds for Napoli to open the scoring with one of the most simple goals I've ever seen in my life. Just a lovely ball over the top, and Politano thought, oh, is this corridor for me? Okay. He wandered down it and finished it straight away. Andrea, before we talk about Napoli, that kind of start just kind of sums up Milan at the moment, doesn't it?
Yeah, tale of two halves as always for Milan. It just seems that they don't know how to just start like normal. it's always like get at least first 20 minutes 0-0 and then see what happens. But yeah, it did serve up to be an interesting game. But again, it's another game where they had to start on the back foot, and it's hard to come back from it, especially against a tough Napoli side.
Well, this is it, and we were kind of talking about it a little bit, Adam, but this Milan team only really know how to start playing when they're 2-0 down, right? Like, they only really seem to wake up at that point.
Pretty much, but this was, I would say, and argue that this was more shambolic. It was totally devoid of any confidence. That was very evident in that first half performance. I don't know if they necessarily had a game plan, but a lot of individuals really shrieked any responsibility, and I'm sure we'll allude to it later on when we talk about the key highlights in this match. But I think this is massively worrying from a kind of fans kind of supporting angle, because you're seeing players there that really didn't seem to have any kind of response to the recent kind of form, and this wasn't going to be an easy game, let's put it that way, but you're expecting a bit more passion, you're expecting a bit more kind of attacking intent, and we really didn't see that until the second half. I thought Teo was doing his Teo things, just really, I don't even call him a left back these days. I don't really know what you call him, because he's got this kind of free will to do whatever he likes.
He's a maverick.
Yeah, he's a maverick. He can do whatever he likes. Doesn't matter. But it always seems with me that he's not disciplined. He never seems to be in a position where he does his position to the letter, and I think that's a bit disappointing, given Sergio Conceicao was brought in under this emphasis and certainly this kind of view that he was a disciplinarian. And I think given how much time has gone by, we're just not seeing that kind of transition onto the pitch now. And I wonder if we've all been hoodwinked into thinking what he did at Porto was down to him as a characteristic. So I think those talks about potentially a new manager or new coach by the end of the season do look like they could be happening as well, Rory.
It just seems so mad. Like, I don't want to talk about his future again, but like, it just seems so mad that everything's so chaotic. It's the same cycle that so many clubs find themselves in the minute, of just like appoint a manager saying it's a project. It doesn't quite work out. You panic, you sack, you go, right, this is the project. It doesn't quite work out. You sack. And it just feels like Milan are tail spinning at the moment, and the performance was just so pathetic in the first half. I don't know, like, did Tomori sleep with Conceicao's wife or something? I don't know what he has to do to get into the team at this point. He can't be as bad as what they're putting out on the field, Andrea. Like, I think a lot of the fans are getting really frustrated with the team selection also.
Yeah, but I think also it's a lot of, obviously, the star players again, like Teo and Leao, underperforming, and that's also the main issue why they always end up in this position. When those type of players aren't performing, that's what makes them tick. That's what makes them, reach the levels that they can reach. But just seems to be persistent with the same players. Even players like Bondo, who I thought was an amazing signing, hasn't really worked, but still playing. There's quite a lot of players in that starting lineup that shouldn't really be in that lineup, but probably it just goes to show that the depth isn't really there. But also, it's just, again, the lack of discipline, like you said. Like, it's surprising because Conceicao is someone who's very disciplined and would change it if needed, but just seems to be persisting with it. But it's not working. So something needs to change. But again, it just seems like he's still sticking with the same team, same style.
Even odd decision. I know, like, it's a kind of, I think it is a game-changing moment or a game-influencing moment. The penalty. Like, Jimenez steps up to take the penalty, but Pulisic is the normal penalty taker from what I'm aware of. He was still on the pitch. Yeah. Like, Adam, it's a strange thing of, like, again, are their egos coming into it more than the the team spirit? Is it more like, well, I'm a striker, I want a goal, so I'll have it, as opposed to like, this guy has taken penalties, he's been our penalty taker, I'll give it him? Like, even that stood out to me as like noteworthy.
I think this was a criticism aimed at Pulisic, that they expected him to maybe stand up and maybe be more vocal and take responsibility, a bit like when you see the Man United, for example,
like Luca
but Bruno Fernandes, for example, he's probably the key player for them. He helps them, create those moments, get those important goals. And you feel with Christian Pulisic, there's something very similar about him. But that kind of criticism has been aimed at him from an international level with America. And you saw it in this match. And I think everyone was surprised that he didn't take the penalty, given that Gimenez also had missed his previous penalty as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of people wondering what the hell is going on and whether he's actually got the characteristics to really be someone that can be considered as maybe someone you can depend on. And I was personally surprised that we didn't see him or maybe Teo stand up and take up that penalty, because I think in that moment you want someone that can guarantee you a goal. And I think had that, been the moment, we could be talking here about a draw, potentially Milan nicking a win. So, curious as to why that decision was made. I don't necessarily feel that was something from the bench. I think it's just down to the confidence of the players, personally.
Yeah, and it does feel like obviously we were talking towards the end of the game, and we are going to talk about Napoli, but as Milan, like the second half was a kind of much improved from Milan. It could have been much worse than the first half, but it was much improved in the second half. And we were kind of joking on WhatsApp, like they're going to equalise late again, aren't they? They always manage to fish themselves out of it. But Andrea, do you think, given their play towards the end, they might have deserved a point, or were they just lucky to even be in the game?
I think they were quite fortunate, because I think Napoli kind of let off the engine, really. They just started to hang on to the 2 goals. Obviously, they were just hanging on to the 2-1 lead. But I think those final 20 minutes, realistically, I don't think Milan really created enough to kind of get that goal. I thought it was quite simplistic the way they played. They're just getting it to the byline, trying to cross it in there. It wasn't really anything different, any kind of different kind of attacking third play. It was just very kind of obvious for Napoli to defend. And when you've got players like Buongiorno in defence, it's so hard to win in the air these type of like chances. So again, I think they did play into Napoli's hands a bit as well. The only thing I'll say is that Napoli just kind of were very nervous, and I think obviously that helped Milan have that extra pass, have that extra space in the final third. But I just expected more. I just felt like there was a lot of times where they had possession, they had the ball with lots of space out wide, and the delivery was awful. So I think in the end, yes, they had the possession and stuff, but I don't think they really did anything to kind of danger Napoli anyway, especially in those final 20 minutes. So I think from a Milan perspective, I think it's quite disappointing that they didn't create more, because I think, as we said, we were thinking they could come back, but I think generally they could have if they were a bit more incisive in the final third, because Napoli were there for the taking. They were really all over the place. It was getting to the point where they were just kicking the ball anywhere for a corner. I think there was one chance they had, a Napoli player just, instead of kicking it for throwing, just kicked it straight for a corner, just to relieve the pressure. So it was there. It's just it must be frustrating.
It doesn't scream calm and collected, but Conte doesn't really scream calm and collected either, does he really? I don't think you're going to get that, like, just shepherd it out to the opposite corner kind of thing. It's going to be more kind of just hoof it, I think. But let's talk about Napoli, because, Adam, this was an absolutely huge win for them. Obviously, a lot of pressure on them with Inter getting the win beforehand. They knew what their job was. Milan have been terrible, but it's still a big game. It's a big name turning up. Yeah. And for them, in their first half, they definitely should have had more than 2 goals. Milan deserved to be punished more than they did. But I thought we saw some really beautiful football from Napoli, because they were allowed the space, but they really took advantage of it.
Yeah, certainly. Made easy by, I don't know, the lack of press from a Milan perspective. And there's a lot of things that we could have called out for that Milan performance. But certainly, I mean, you can only do what's in front of you, right? That's the typical phrase, you can only beat what's in front of you. And I thought they were really solid. generally, I think they apply themselves in the right manner. But I think there is that kind of fragility in them, as shown in the second half. Like we're mentioning, by the fact that they didn't have that kind of calm, composed kind of outlook. And I think this alludes back to the conversations that we had after the January transfer window, where it was like that kind of lack of depth that Napoli have. They don't necessarily have those impact players that they can bring on in terms of like helping to kind of solidify the results. I felt as soon as Lukaku came off as well, in particular, although I didn't think he necessarily had a lot in the game itself apart from that actual moment. I worry because Simeone hasn't been the kind of all singing and dancing Simeone that we've been used to in previous seasons. And Cyril and Gonge, again, he's lackluster, it's best to say. So I don't think they've necessarily got those attacking flair players that can really apply the pressure in the same manner that Conte wants. And yeah, I wonder if, a team that's better equipped, that maybe has a bit more tenacity, probably gets a result out of this, because I think Napoli weren't special in that second half. And I think that's one of the things that Conte will consider is how does he set himself out? Because, they haven't got as many games in comparison to Inter when it comes to this title race. Now, how does he go about it to ensure that they've got that freshness as well? That's a dilemma for him to sort out. So, yeah, whilst it's a very good outing overall, I think there's things to consider as well.
Yeah, it was very much like that. You could see the relief at the end and Conte's reaction when the penalty was saved by Mera. It's a terrible penalty as well, by the way. But like you could see I had the relief when that was saved and when the final whistle was blown. But Andrea, I wanted to talk a little bit about Buongiorno. Obviously, he went through a bit of an injury. He was out for a while with an injury. Yeah. He had a bit of a slow start when he returned, as is understandable. But it feels like he's now he's back in form again. He's looking as solid as when he left.
Yeah, definitely. And I think he suits Conte to a T in terms of that kind of no-nonsense kind of style that Conte's had previously with like players like Chiellini back in the day. So he's always preferred these type of players that will just, head it out, clear their lines, no fuss, no risks at the back. But I also think he does that effectively, and he doesn't cause any risk. He's quite good on the ball as well, of course. But also, I just think that's the main thing, is the fact that he doesn't have a mistake in him. You don't feel like he has a mistake in him. You feel like he is solid enough to last the 90 without doing any errors. But he's been pivotal, and I think he's definitely shored up Napoli's defence in terms of stability, because I think they were hanging on loose with Juan Jesus playing every game, which was unbelievable. It's still unbelievable, but again, it just shows the class, I guess, coming in from a big injury and just have that instant impact yet again. In the national teams where he played as well, so he's getting back up to kind of the level he was previously. So it's good to see, and I can see him doing well even more for the rest of the season as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Really happy to see him doing well, a player that we really appreciate on this pod. And Adam, Billy Gilmour getting his first assist for Napoli. He's starting to come into the team a little bit more consistently, starting to find his role a little bit. I think we were all a little bit worried at the beginning of the season. It didn't seem like he was going to really find himself anywhere, but he's really stepping up in this team a little bit, and it was nice to see him get that little moment.
I always felt that he had quality and credentials, personally. I think maybe it's just adapting to the league itself. And obviously, don't forget, I think the system itself isn't something that Gilmour's kind of used to, given that he's been used to having more players around him in the systems that he's played at Brighton, for example, and Chelsea, versus playing for Napoli, where you are one of a three-man midfield at times. You are stretched across that kind of pitch, and you're expected to have that kind of same intensity and tenaciousness that he applies himself. So yes, probably you could argue that it's taken him a little bit longer in comparison to Scott McTominay, but I think they offer two different styles of football, and equally I think that's probably the other aspect that I think maybe people were thinking of him being maybe the Lobotka kind of replacement, and he's not that. He's a different style of footballer in comparison. So it's good to see him get some consistency in terms of his performances, and it's good to see, even on this game when he did come off, Conte giving him a pat on the back as well, because I think he really does appreciate what he adds to this team as well.
No, absolutely. My girlfriend's cousin is a Napoli fan, and when Napoli signed him and McTominay, he's like, "What can you expect?" I was like, "McTominay is going to be the all action. He'll get goals. He'll catch the headlines." But I was like, "Gilmore will be the player that if you watch Napoli every week, you'll really appreciate him as a player because you'll see all the little passing and the work he does." Like judging him on his assists and goals is not what he does. It was just a nice moment to see him get that assist and see him like it feels like every week now or more weeks we're seeing him in the team. So it's good to see that that's going well for him. But ultimately a huge win for Napoli. Andrea, I just wanted to very quickly before we move on talk about the Lukaku goal because I think it was a really well taken goal, but I don't know if Milan could have given him any more time to pick his spot.
Absolutely terrible. And it's the fact that like they even tried to claim for offside, and I just like,
it's brilliant.
It's actually embarrassing. I'm just like, put your hand down. Like honestly, no, it's just again, it's just you can't give a striker like Lukaku any space, right? But you give him like a whole field. What do you expect? It's absolutely crazy, criminal defending. Honestly, it's just the one player that you need to make sure is not free had the most space of all. It's just that make it make sense.
Unbelievable. And of course, Adam, it's Kyle Walker who just loses concentration, just keeps running and plays him onside. Like there was just zero line to that defence whatsoever.
Well, you could definitely fit like a double-decker bus in the space that Lukaku found himself. Like it wasn't just Kyle Walker, I'll give you that. It was a combination of Gabia, Pavlovic, and Teo Hernandez just being a maverick, as we've said already. But yeah, it's how not to defend. Show kids that basically is what you have to say. And let me just put it on the record. I felt Lukaku was almost going to scuff that effort because he made it look harder than it actually was. So, I think he was grateful that that actually went into the back of the net as well.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. It kind of bobbled weirdly, didn't it? It does kind of loop over, and I'm not sure if you meant that. But, he won't care. 2-1, big win for Napoli, and it does keep them in the title race fully on Inter's tails.